It's Anomaa Malinda. Thanks so much for joining us on Connections. On today's program, we'll be actually looking at the 1983 riots and its inclusion in our history, in Sri Lanka's history. So I'm going to start off by asking you, Malinda, is 1983 being recollected in your perception in the proper way?
I don't know if there's any proper way to recollect anything. Tragedy is recollected, landmark events in history are remembered, and 1983 July incident, riots and so on have been referenced enough. It's never enough, but it has been referenced considerably in the whole discourse on Sinhala-Tamil relations, ethnic conflict so called, and so on. As always in history, depends on who is interested in remembering and how much of that remembering gets publicized. For the victims, the loved ones of the dead, it is never enough.
Okay, so Anomaa, from a filmmaker's point of view, in terms of audiovisual history, and 1983, because it was one landmark event in terms of Sri Lanka's history, 1983. So, and you've also had some experience in terms of trying to document it through a teledrama series. Could you talk to us a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, actually, as Malinda said, when it comes to events like this, it's never, when it comes to documentation, it's never enough, because there are people involved, the stories told and stories untold, mainly looking into people's lives, what happened and what happened thereafter. It's nothing to do with 83. I mean, in the recent history, what about 1971? Was it documented? I think most of the things when it comes to history documentation, I think post-colonial period, like look at the last 50-60 years, many things have not been documented. That's what I see. You ask about my work in relation to 83, actually not about 83, people who are displaced after 83, Sinhalese, Muslims, Tamils, everybody, like all three communities, what happened after 93, one after the other, all the incidents connected to each other. I have been documenting people's lives, especially women and children, because there's a whole new generation born in displacement.
In terms of the official history in Sri Lanka, what do you think are the events that actually get documented, and what do you think are the events that don't get documented?
So
say, for example,
is there an official history?
Yeah, what is official?
Like say, I mean, for me, I would think the official history is what we sort of see in the textbooks, for instance, as an example.
So the textbooks, I don't know, textbooks talk about histories of long ago. But there is also, we have to talk about this, I think, because there are certain histories when documented, it's very remunerative. That is why 83 is focused on. 83, there were less than 500 people who died. And the tragedy is not that, 400, how many people died, but that even one person had to die, right? And we saved a lot of people, we couldn't save everyone. But in 88, 89, 6 years later, 60,000 people were killed, unarmed people, slaughtered. Where is the documentation on that? Where is the money? Wait, was it because the wrong kind of people died in 83 and the right kind of people died in 88, right or wrong? There is no official, to the extent that you take statements from presidents and prime ministers and people like that. If that is official, what can they do beyond making a statement? Chandrika Bandaranaike apologized on behalf of all Sinhalese. I don't know for what. I don't think she had the right to apologize on my behalf. I didn't kill anyone, right? There was no apology from anyone about what happened in 88, 89. There's no apology from anyone. Now if you say the Sinhalese did this, did the Tamils, are they responsible for what happened in Katankudi or Sri Mahabaga? No. So the reading of that history is selective as always, and it's selective from in different ways. So I don't think this official thing is that critical, that crucial. It's more important that the general perception of the public how these things are remembered, and there we can read where our prejudices lie, what we try to forget, what we try to remember, and the politics of memory.
So, yeah.
Actually, because you are referring to textbooks like history, especially in school curriculum, history is ancient history. Recent history is not considered history in Sri Lanka. And this is like now, for example, like contemporary themes, even in art in Sri Lanka. Right now, the Sri Lankan cinema is dominated by the historical, so-called historical films, themes. But we hardly see any contemporary themes on Sri Lankan cinema, because Sri Lankan cinema is Sinhalese cinema, because there's hardly any Tamil cinema creations being created in the country. So we see all these things because right now at the university level, yes, in a post-war situation, conflict resolution and themes such as conflict resolution has been introduced as subjects, and there are like a few universities that who have the degrees in conflict resolution and all. But I don't see that in especially school curriculums, because we don't consider recent history as history.
Okay, so in terms of documenting such events and its importance, how important do you actually think it is that these events are documented in history in terms of sort of formulating opinions and, you know, biases, things like that? Anomaa, please start off.
Yeah, we all have our own biases. I mean, that's why when it comes to like, especially like when it comes to media, that we have code of ethics and things like that. But when it comes to documentation in a post-war situation in a country like Sri Lanka, what I would like to say is documentation is important, but for me, the archiving purpose is more important, because sometimes we document, but what happened, you know, this whole documentation is erased in a way. So I think it's really important that we talk about archiving the history also, you know, what is being recorded, what is being documented. Especially like as a filmmaker, I would say that we are in a country where we don't have a film archive, and we don't have a television archive. So film, at least that we know that it has a long lifespan, but the videotape, you know, this, we never talk of audio and video documentation as part of a history of a country. Audiovisual footage is not considered history. So in such a situation, documentation is important, but what is more important is whatever little documentation that we have, you know, archiving that. That is really important, I see.
So in terms of the impact it can have on a community, I mean, hearing about certain events and not hearing about others, do you think that that could play a big role in sort of formulating opinions?
Yeah, because this is now a visual era, right? We are bombarded by the visual more than the text, and it has an impact. I mean, Channel 4 comes up with a bunch of rubbish and doctored footage, and that is history all of a sudden, because it is referenced in historical statements, in historical events, in historical decisions that have an impact on people, right? So it is not innocent. They are not saying these are our biases, we all have our biases, but we won't say what they are, we just say we have our biases. If we are asked, if not we say it as to its biblical truth, like this is what happened. So that is irresponsible and malicious, and most importantly, that is typical. So if you want real history, you know, toss it up and see what comes out. One version is as valid as the other.
Okay, in the same manner, one would say that even sort of things which are passed down to children as textbook, and this is your official history of your country, many would argue that that too has been state propagated. Exactly. With certain elements.
Exactly, because history is version, right? History is version. One person sees it one way, the other person sees it another way. But you can't say that Ruanvel is a church, right? There has to be a certain element of substantiation, of claim, and then you can go. You can say Ruanvel Sahib was actually not built by Dutukam. It was not. It was built by his bosses, right? But it was Ruanvel Sahib. It's not a church, right? So the believability That has to come out of discussion, and if the forum is not if the forum is structured in such a way that certain voices are privileged and certain voices are not, then the reading will be slanted one way or the other. So that issue is always there. There is power and there is powerless.